Welcome back, my friends, to the trip that never ends. Welcome back, my friends. Step inside, step inside.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian from the Peace Genesis Project, and this is Josh. And Josh is the channel for SOTU. And
So
what
they
is that?
say,
What does that have to do with the Peace Genesis Project or peace? Well, we're going to ask SOTU
oh
today
dear.
because what's the purpose of all that if not to have the vision and the dream and the possibility of peace? So you can decide for yourself whether or not you believe in channeling or all that, but really it's about the message. So see what you think.
All right. Well, all right. Hello, everyone. We are so too, and we invite you to join us on another journey through the infinite realms of your imagination. So, what was the question, Adrian?
Well, the idea and the concepts within the Peace Genesis project came from you and an aspect of you, earlier aspect, we call Ezekiel, but the premise and the belief that that's possible and even destined for humanity. I'd
Well,
like you to speak about that.
the possibility of peace, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Well, that became, it's one of those questions that comes up, especially in the one's earlier investigations of the metaphysical, of the understanding of reality, and how things actually work in a physical, metaphysical, and in a spiritual sort of way. And as you begin to learn it, ultimately the question came up, what is peace? And so that began the journey, that began the exploration. And we worked with and we talked with, we're working with a number of groups back in those days. And that was probably 30, 35 years ago. We basically put it before many people and we ask them, just as we ask you, what is your definition of peace? And to make a long story short, in that sort of way, because we're talking about maybe a year's worth of question and answer and discussion around the subject, it came down to the point where peace is different for each person, but it boiled down to a feeling of safety and security. And within that dynamic of that feeling of safety and security, one could find a personal measure of peace and a personal measure of peace in the dynamics of the consensus reality too. Now, of course, that means a whole shift in thinking, which is part of the premise of the other way that we have been presenting recently. Just to have you understand that there is always another way, and there is a way that has to do with the light choices for your lives, and others with the dark choices, and some have to do with service to self, and others have to do with service to others. But ultimately, and we realize we're going kind of around the back door here, but there is a whole dynamic of as you decided, and it was you, because we left the space for you to answer these questions. We did not come up with an answer for you. It was basically decided after speaking with many and communicating with many in this way. There was ultimately the realization that peace was an emotion. Peace was an emotion that can only be had through safety and security. Of course, then comes the next question is, how do you find safety and security in a world of competition and comparison? And we would suggest to you, each and every one of you, that if you look around your world right now, you would say that in so many ways your world is forcing you to come to grips with the fact that the old ways of competition and comparison don't really serve anymore. And even though you can keep it going in many ways, it leaves out a whole dynamic of human experience that has to do with spirit, that has to do with emotion, that has to do with knowing that you are divine beings manifested in physical bodies. And as you begin to learn and understand that whole dynamic, you realize that peace comes from that safety and security. And in this world, well, that would be basically food, water, shelter. And if you add healthcare and education to that dynamic, what you wind up having is an equal start for each individual. And in the concept of all beings, all humans are created equal, is this not ultimately the bottom line? If you were guaranteed to have at least your survival needs met as far as these five aspects, we would suggest that there would be no war. There would be no reason for it. There would be no reason for the competition and comparison. And you might try cooperation, and you might try compassion, and you might try understanding. And so it leaves a whole dynamic of an opportunity for a change of movement, a movement from competition and comparison to the other way, which is caring, compassion, and connection. So, for each of you, it brings the question to bear. And if you haven't explored it for yourselves, we think it's long past time for you to do that. What does peace mean to you? We love you all so very, very much. And so until the next time we close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy.